was important. Glad to see you grew up.
Welcome everybody. Okay, welcome to this new meetup of Strasbourg Startups. We are here tonight to discuss how to build a collaborative ecosystem. Usually I present meetups in French, as you can hear it, but tonight it's in English because we have a lot of special guests and we are happy to have to adopt an international approach. This approach and our vision, we explain them both in a white paper. This white paper is named Strasbourg Startup Strasbourg Startup City 2020, and we believe in the digital transition and in the fact that it can help people, it can help the economy, culture, and other important things. However, Strasbourg is a little bit behind compared to other similar cities in France. To raise awareness about the situation we published. Je suis désolé, j'ai le bras qui tremble. On a porté les trucs lourds avant. Si quelqu'un a un truc pour les bras, tétanisé. To raise awareness about the situation, we published this white paper collaboratively. You can easily find it on Medium, so I encourage you to read it, to share it, and to clap it, as we say nowadays. You cannot even more like it, so clap it. We already have a small ecosystem in Strasbourg. It's called Strasbourg Startups. And this event is supported by the community. We are nearly 40 companies that gather together and organize meetups, demo nights, as tonight, and diners in a Founders Club. Our mission is to connect startups to each other, but also to institutions, to investors, to industrial groups, and the general public as it is tonight. Strasbourg Startups is just one of the communities of Alsace Digitale. Alsace Digitale is a non-profit organization whose mission is to bring initiatives together and promote digital innovation and entrepreneurship. We have, for example, AK6B, Florian. Florian, is, you know where is Florian? Yeah, just right here. Florian from AK6B. And another company which unites makers around terms like do-it-yourself, electronics, fab labs. We also have Play to Code to teach coding and the use of digital tools to children and teenagers. Alsace Digital organizes around 100 events per year, and one of the biggest is Strasbourg Startup Weekend. Do you know Startup Weekend from Techstars in the US? That you might already know about. It will take place on the weekend of the 24th of November in Strasbourg. So if you are during these days here, come to be part of it. There will be a lot of energy, a lot of people, and a lot of food. And tickets are already on sale, and we have a special early bird price until tonight, I think so. So you have to buy it right now. Now I would like to thank the Management School of Strasbourg that helped us get such wonderful speakers for tonight. And it's time to welcome the first one. She is the Consul General of the United States of America in Strasbourg for the Great East region in France, and Deputy Permanent Representative to the Council of Europe. Hope it's good. Welcome, please, Cara McDonald.
It's perfect. Thank you. Thank you all for the very warm welcome. It's great to see all the seats filled. I think this is fantastic and a testament to the dynamism and the energy that exists in the startup field here. I'm very excited to be with you tonight. Let me just first say that the United States Consulate here in Strasbourg is a proud partner for this project. We looked to sponsor this project in part because, of course, the ecosystem, and I love the way you describe this, but the ecosystem here in France, it also impacts us in the United States. You know, France and the United States, we are tremendous trading partners. So the health and the dynamism of the architecture here, the system here, has an impact too on us in the United States. So we see this very much as a symbiotic relationship, one that we want to feed and nurture as we move forward in our partnership between French and American interests. If I may just mention a couple of statistics from our partnership. So France is, of course, the 8th largest consumer in terms of goods. I'm sorry, let me try that again. 8th largest trading partner in terms of goods. The U.S. is for France outside of the EU. We, in the United States, are the largest trading partner for goods, customer of goods from France. We're also, in terms of services, we have a very extensive trading relationship. I want to thank Michael Goldberg for being here tonight, for sharing your expertise, your experience, your innovation, your research with these groups. The one qualification I would make on tonight is that we want this to be a discussion. This is not meant to be a lecture style with audience listening. Of course, we want you to hear what Michael has to say and the presentation he has, but really the goal here is conversation. If you feel that English is not really your strong suit or your thing, it's no problem. Ask your question or tell about your experience in French. We can certainly find quelqu'un ici va parler français de toute façon. Donc c'est pas un problème. On peut se parler aussi en français. So feel free to please be lively. Stand up, express your experiences, share experiences. That's what tonight is really all about. The last comment I just want to make is regarding the Foreign Commercial Service. The U.S. has, of course, representation from the Foreign Commercial Service in Paris. We are in contact with them, and if you have any interest in investment, in development of the business sector within the United States, please, we would be happy to be in touch. We would be happy to give you any information that you're interested in and to put you in touch with our colleagues at the Foreign Commercial Service in Paris. So with that, I will just also mention that I'm unfortunately not able to stay the whole evening with you. I have family obligations, 2 very little children at home, so I appreciate the energy with which you guys are here. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And now our second guest comes from the Weatherhead School of Management in Cleveland, Ohio. So he also brought a lot of students with him, I think so. Maybe the...
Raise your hands. Woo!
Yeah, cool. So please welcome Mr. Michael Goldberg.
Let me set up my PowerPoint. All right. Do that.
Or a joke in English. Want to try?
What is green and go up and down?
We have a joke here.
Don't look at my password.
Okay, what is green and go up and down? It's an international one. No? Nobody? Green, go up, go down, go up, go down. A little green bean in an elevator. Okay, thank you.
Second one?
Better one?
Is it okay?
Yeah, hold on. So much suspense.
Okay, good.
Hold on. Whoa, okay. Sorry.
We have some seats here.
Oh wow, you get the front row. Yeah. Okay, hold on one second. Come on. Okay. I'll just run with it. Hey,
Let's do it?
let's do it. Oh, are you translating? No. Or you're just giving it to me?
No, I give it.
Okay, thank you. All right. Phew. All right, let's make this work.
Good.
Is my voice loud enough? When I was at university, I was the broadcaster of the basketball team for my university. So tomorrow night at the Strasbourg against Madrid game, in case they need an extra broadcaster.
Nice.
So let me do a quick, there's some familiar faces here. Of course, they're the students that traveled with me from Cleveland. They look very familiar. How many of you are entrepreneurs in this room? Okay. How many are students? You could be both. Anybody working for government? Few. Okay. Few, okay. Some, okay, great. NGOs? Few NGOs. I know some people are multiple. Other? Okay. Working for companies, larger companies? Advisors, okay. Others? Well, it's great to be here. So this is my second visit to Strasbourg. I was here last year, and actually we did a nice event last year at IRCAD with the consulate. Did anybody go to that event at IRCAD last year? So some of it may sound familiar. Act surprised when you see some of these slides. So here's a little bit about my background. I spent a couple years working for an NGO in South Africa, doing voter education for a USAID-funded project when Mandela was elected. After I studied at Princeton, I have my MBA from Wharton and a Master's in International Affairs from Johns Hopkins. I worked at Microsoft when I was in business school, and then I spent 5 years working for America Online. All the young people have never heard of that company. How many people here have never gotten on the internet by plugging a phone line into their computer? Right, I know, these young people. All right, so we were the largest internet company back in the old Internet 1.0. We merged with Time Warner, the largest loss of shareholder value in corporate history. Wasn't my fault. Then I moved back to Cleveland. I started a venture capital fund, and we'll talk about venture capital. What does a venture capitalist do? Invest money.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. So we take money from investors. So we go out like entrepreneurs and pitch potential limited partners, and then we deploy money. My partner's based in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and we invest in early stage medical companies. I teach with these guys at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland at Weatherhead. And I also was lucky enough to partake in another excellent U.S. government program called the Fulbright. How many of you have heard of Fulbright? Any Fulbright alums in here?
I was a
all right.
candidate.
Candidate, all right, apply again. I mean, it's a great program. We have, I'll just confirm, we have Fulbright opportunities for French students to go to the U.S., correct?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
So to do graduate work, also for anybody who's in, any professors here? So there's opportunities also for professors. So I did the Professor Fulbright, and I went to that country. Anybody know that flag? Vietnam. Okay, so that's my crew. A few years ago, it was 2012. And I was teaching in a business school at the, it was the National Economics University, and it was more like traditional, doing a startup, business model canvas, all the things that you guys, my entrepreneurs in here know and love. But I got a request from the government of Vietnam, from their Ministry of Science and Technology. They have an agency to support entrepreneurship. And they said, can you do a course for us about how Vietnam can become more like Silicon Valley? And I was like, well, I'd actually never lived in Silicon Valley. But this is something that's like, I mean, people smile when we say that because I think it's a very common thing that people say. So like when we talk about Silicon Valley, like what is it that everybody wants that Silicon Valley has? First of all, how many of you have been to San Francisco before? Okay, quite a few. So what's so great about San Francisco and Silicon Valley? What do they have that we all want?
Good weather.
Good weather, okay, better than Cleveland, right. What else? What else does San Francisco or Silicon Valley have that the Vietnamese wanted or the French want? What do we all want?
High tech.
Which one? High tech, so explain that.
Technology, and as of course Silicon Valley is also known as the world's biggest computer technology hub.
Great, so it's high tech, lots of technology. What else? Networks, talk about networks.
For example, they are able to make wine after like 5 years of processing it.
Okay.
Something that takes us a lot of
Okay, so they've got technological innovation, right? But you also, did you say networks?
Yep.
And what about what's so great, and what is it about? What do they do so well with networks out there?
I guess they saw the impact of sharing their competences.
Yeah.
Uh,
And a lot of these guys, like you hear, like the Facebook mafia or the PayPal. So like Elon Musk was at PayPal, along with Pierre Omidyar and a bunch of these guys, and they go and start other companies. So you have this like amazing people that work together, and then they go start other things. Great. What else does Silicon Valley have?
They have money.
They have money. Talk about that.
There is a lot of investors, and money is disponible.
Right. And why? Like, so why? Why is it? Why is there so much
Because,
money out there?
They had much success.
Right. So they've had success.
Yes.
Investors have had success, and then they're looking to deploy money in the next group. So, you know, it's gotten to a point. I mean, obviously, when you look at the figures of venture capital in the U.S., like the vast majority of venture capital sits in Silicon Valley, and they want to invest in deals that are close. I mean, we'll get to Strasbourg and Cleveland, but like investors like to be able to go down the street and like hear about your business. I mean, these guys are doing a great business of children. Yeah, woo, they're on TV, they're doing all this great stuff. But until we were able to sit today, if I'm sitting in Cleveland or we've got one of my student entrepreneurs here, Zyla, like it's hard to find each other. So all these people are going to San Francisco, and that's where the money and the entrepreneurs are. What else? What else is great about San Francisco? People, okay.
With expertise and skills.
Okay, so they have people with expertise, experience, talent. What about like the attitude out there? Well,
So I was going to say that I would say the people out there probably have more pragmatic approach towards risk.
okay. I don't know if they're more pragmatic. In many ways, like they embrace risk.
Exactly.
Yeah. Ben.
They're open to new ideas.
Okay, open to new ideas.
Accept people. They're willing to accept many people from many different walks of life and ideas that come from those people.
Actually, it's so diverse. I mean, this is a great diverse crowd. I mean, San Francisco and Silicon Valley is so diverse. And I think one of the challenges actually is in the new administration and with immigration being such a hot topic, and I know it is here, is over 50% of startups in San Francisco are started by foreign born. So lots of questions about can San Francisco continue to have that diversity. But yeah, it's a really diverse, and it's also a meritocracy. I mean, it really doesn't matter in Silicon Valley who your parents are. Okay, maybe if your parents were Steve Jobs, it might be an advantage, but it's really sort of who you are and what you've done. I mean, the other thing that no one mentioned, I don't know, Zala, did you have something?
Oh yeah, instead of seeing failure as a bad thing, it's seen as a learning experience, so nobody fears failing.
That's what I was gonna say. Good, it was a plan. There's this failure, embrace of failure. So like, it's interesting because it was Betsy, when you said about pragmatic, I think they are in some ways, but like they have these, you know, excuse my language, these like F up parties, and like it's okay to fail, and investors actually realize that if you fail, you probably learned something along the way, and I think we struggle with that in other places. Yeah,
So I
Tom?
was kind of following up on the culture of accepting the failure. I think fundamentally it's the culture. Maybe it's almost like everybody thinks the same way.
Yep.
Not just on failures. There's other parts to that as well, not just failure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great. So this is, you know, you talked about all these things. I mean, you have these big iconic companies with sort of talent. You've got these, you know, famous larger-than-life leaders. And then the money piece, and this may or may not be as familiar, these names, but like Sequoia, Greylock, Andreessen Horowitz, big venture capital funds, lots of angel investors that are looking to deploy money. They've made money, and they're not fearing, you know, making a small angel investment. And we'll talk about what's happening here. So that's Silicon Valley. So I back to Vietnam. I told my friends in Vietnam that I was not going to do the talk about Silicon Valley because I didn't think it was relevant to where Vietnam was at that time. And instead, I decided to do a course for them on that city. And no one in my class can answer. Anybody know where this is? Anybody know this guy? LeBron.
Yeah.
Woo! Any Cavs fans here? Any Warriors fans?
No.
Boo. So Cleveland, right? Anybody been to Cleveland here besides my students in Philippa? Does anybody know where Cleveland is? Where's Cleveland?
Rust Belt.
Rust Belt, exactly, right. So we're in between, perfect. We're in between Detroit and Pittsburgh. We had lots of people from, less from France, but other parts of Eastern Europe that were coming over, and we were once kicking ass. We were like a great economic power, as were Detroit and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh makes steel, Detroit makes cars. We were bending metal, and our economy was great, right? This was our most famous entrepreneur back in the day. Anybody not from Cleveland know that guy? Rockefeller. So John Rockefeller's from Cleveland. So 100 years ago, Cleveland was the 5th largest city in the United States and a really important economy. Then what happened? Yep, economic crisis, transportation. What happened? I mean, what happened to our jobs? What happened to our economy?
They went south.
They went south and then east, right? So a lot of our traditional. I mean, it was funny. We took the tour of Mercedes today, and it was amazing to see the automation. But before there was automation, there was cheaper labor in non-union places outside of Cleveland, right? So a lot of our manufacturing jobs went south, and then they went overseas. So this was like an old, like textile thing. I mean, I can't imagine in France there's many places that are making shirts anymore either, right? So the jobs went first down south, and then they're in Asia. I mean, you can't get a shirt made in Cleveland, Ohio anymore. We were the 5th largest city in the U.S. By 2012, we became the 47th largest city. And so, like, I grew up in Cleveland. I graduated from high school in 1988. I was interested in entrepreneurship. Do you think I was going to stay in Cleveland? I was gone, right? So I was like, I'm gone, and I'm never going to come back. And actually, I talked with Catherine today about this, like, brain drain. So brain drain, I know, is an issue in Strasbourg. It's a huge issue in Cleveland. So our entrepreneurs were leaving and not coming back. Entrepreneur Magazine did a survey of 61 communities in the U.S. and how well they supported entrepreneurship in 2001. Do you know how well Cleveland did? 61. We're last. All right, so now you're still wondering, like, why am I doing this lecture for the Vietnamese about Cleveland? I'll get to that. So things were really bad. Then, actually, why don't we have Brian Perro, who's going to McKinsey and starting, you know, McKinsey & Company, famous consulting firm. We send our students to these great places. So McKinsey did a study in Cleveland in about 2001 and 2002 for free. Every once in a while they do something for free, not often. And they basically, the task was like, how do we grow startups in Cleveland? Like, basically, like, everybody's leaving, our economy stinks, like, young people are not sticking around, so what do we do? And basically, this study looked at a bunch of other cities, including others in the Rust Belt. Actually, Pittsburgh, whose comeback has started a little bit ahead of us, put in place a couple of programs to try to, like, start to keep startups there. And basically what happened, and this is why I didn't teach the class on Silicon Valley. Like, in Silicon Valley at this point, and there's a lot of, the history of Silicon Valley involves government funding, it involves all sorts of things, but like at this point it's a very well-formed private ecosystem. Like, and remind me of your company name again? Epopia. So if the guys from Epopia are going out to San Francisco to pitch, like, people are gonna, there's money out there, they're gonna invest, there's enough private money that they're gonna invest because they think they can make money, right? In Cleveland, like, we didn't really have venture capital, we didn't have angels, we didn't have any private money. So if you don't have a fully formed private ecosystem, where else can you look? Because it's huge, obviously, in places like France and in Cleveland. Where else can fund the ecosystem? Where else do you look for funding if it's not going to be from private? Government, right? So we'll talk about that. So in Ohio, and I'll talk about a program, we had a huge government intervention to try to boost startups. Where else? Banks are still sort of private. I mean, there are some programs that they may do as corporate social responsibility, and we'll talk about that a bit tonight. What's that? So crowdfunding, let's talk about that. I mean, you can get people that are doing things as donors. Often, I mean, some crowdfunding is like, and Zyla did a crowdfunding, you can use it as a sales channel, right? But you could also do it to donate to a cause, right? So the thing that happened in Cleveland is a lot of our foundation, so our philanthropy, started supporting entrepreneurship, which is very strange for us, and we'll talk about that, because typically, what do foundations support? Non-profit organ, like what? That do what? What's that?
Like help society, help the
Right, help the poor, help the homeless. What else? Arts, education, right. So now we're saying, all right, we need our donors to help a bunch of people that look like you guys, entrepreneurs, right? Why would they do that? Why would the foundations help support entrepreneurship? Yeah, so basically, like those are, you're exactly right. Those are the ones who are going to support the jobs, right? So I did this course that I just talked about. I just did it via Skype in Vietnam. Actually, it was like a room about this size. It was a bunch of people running accelerators, a bunch of entrepreneurs, and I had friends doing Skype. Actually, it was funny when you were standing next to me. It was like I had a Vietnamese translator. It was night. It was daytime in the U.S. Everybody was super tired. They were probably very bored. But they seemed interested. They acted interested. Kind of like you guys. You're acting interested. You might be bored. So we did these Skype sessions, and so people were like, "Oh, that was useful." So they learned about what Cleveland did with government. They learned about. I had somebody from one of our leading NGOs that we'll talk about, and then I came back to the U.S. I'd never taught something on ecosystems before. Then I came back actually to our business school. I was talking to one of our deans, and they had just started my university doing something called MOOCs. Who's familiar with MOOC? The term MOOC? Okay, a couple people. So it stands for Massive Open Online Courses. Stanford professor Sebastian Thrun put an artificial intelligence class up online. He thought he was going to have a couple hundred people. He had 140,000 or something. And a few new platforms like Coursera, which is venture capital backed, edX, which was started by MIT and Harvard, started putting courses up on, mostly for free, sort of on these platforms and kind of reaching the world. So we talked about it, and I actually had never heard of a MOOC, and so I decided to create this course. It's called Beyond Silicon Valley, and basically what it was is interviewing, these were all people in our ecosystem, entrepreneurs, funders, government officials, and I put this class up on Coursera. There's me. I sound a lot better when there's no voice, you know. And I basically put this up on Coursera, and I honestly I had no idea if anybody, because some of it is a little bit of we're using Cleveland as this case study. It's very random. No one's heard of it. But basically what happened was, it's not, because we're so we're not intimidating like Cleveland's story. It actually became a nice way to catalyze discussion. So we launched the class in 2014, and now we've had 135,000 students take the class. We have subtitles in 16 languages, including French. And it's just been an amazing experience. And I was telling Kara, I've done a lot of different, sometimes through partners at the State Department, I've been able to do a lot of different discussions like this, all over the world, and across the border in Germany, Greece, not Poland, not Nigeria yet, but Kosovo, Macedonia, the Netherlands, Argentina, Chile, Indonesia, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Russia, Morocco, all this, what you guys did your white paper on, this question of how do we grow entrepreneurship is such a hot topic around the world. So through this class, I really got to meet a lot of people. So let me just kind of quickly, and there's all these great pictures of all your things, which is awesome. So this is my second time in Strasbourg, which makes me an expert on Strasbourger. So I know a little bit. I had a great 2 days with our students here. We spent yesterday morning, and I see some of the entrepreneurs that are in the EM Strasbourg's Masters in Entrepreneurship program. And then this morning, Catherine and the Alsace digital team organized. We got to spend time with Epopia. And who else was here? I saw Florian. Oh, right, Sebastian. Sebastian, right? Sort of brainstorming about your business. So we got to learn more. So again, I'll probably have a bunch of mistakes up here, but I just wanted to give a couple of examples of what Cleveland is doing and what I've heard is happening here. And then, as Kara said, we'll have a discussion. So our big government support in Cleveland has really come through regional government, through something called the Third Frontier Program. This is a $2.3 billion state initiative that's funded a lot of our entrepreneurship. This Fund for Our Economic Future is interesting. I mentioned this philanthropy, that had normally funded the arts or social services. These foundations came together to support economic development and entrepreneurship. I'm somewhat familiar with the landscape here, BPI and JEE, kind of at a national level. Obviously, and I've seen the French tech programs in other regions that I've been to in France, and I know that Adria is working at a regional level here. So I know that government funding, that's certainly one thing we have in common. Government funding in both of our regions is playing a really critical role in supporting startups. And we can talk about the way that these programs are administered because, frankly, government funding can often lead to many, many problems. And frankly, if government is funding something 100%, it's probably a screwed up program, right? If you don't have matching funding. So a lot of our programs in Ohio are requiring a match, so 50% comes from government and 50% comes from a university or a philanthropy or the private sector to basically keep it honest. NGOs, very interesting topic for Strasbourg and Cleveland. Jumpstart, I mentioned that we sort of copied what Pittsburgh had done. So Pittsburgh had an organization called Innovation Works. And what's interesting about Innovation Works and also Jumpstart, and we had a good conversation today with Catherine and Sebastian about, and I know Semia is, okay, I have them on different slides. Is anybody from Semia here? Oh, you're free, okay. Because I know you guys administer some grant dollars. So Jumpstart, the money is from government and the money is from donors, but they're actually making equity investments into companies. And because they're an NGO, when they have an exit, so the most likely good outcome for our entrepreneurs in the room is that you're going to get acquired. That would be wonderful. Some of you may dream of an IPO. Very difficult. And of course, these are the good exits. Most early stage investors, we expect our money out not as sort of a profit share or revenue share, but we want these guys to grow and grow big and get acquired. So Jumpstart has invested since 2004 in almost 100 companies, about $30 million in the companies. And this is, well, let me ask you, I'll ask you guys this question. How long for successful exits? What's the typical length of time from first money in to an acquisition or an IPO? 3 years, 8 years, 6. It ends up being, it's funny, 14 is about, it's over 10 or 11, even like Facebook, which obviously that would have been a good investment. These things take a while. So entrepreneurs will come in, like how many, when you're pitching your investors, how long do you tell them until you're going to exit?
I don't want to do an exit, so I want to be the next Facebook.
Okay. Well, he might IPO. Okay. But even if you do it that way, you're going to, at some point, if you take in an investor's money, you're going to have to exit at some point. So if I pressed you, if I said, tell me how many years until you exit.
I will say 10.
Okay. So 10 is like maybe more realistic. So Jumpstart started in 2004. 100 companies later, $30 million later, they really didn't have any big exits, right? And this February, a company called Cover My Meds sold for $1.1 billion. So, and we call that a unicorn, right? So that's the name. And it turns out, and for those that invest or take in money, depending on what the investors after you did and what sort of terms, it's not sure what the payout. But for that deal that Jumpstart, and they didn't disclose it, but basically that one deal of where they invested about $500,000 will return over almost $40 million. So it replenishes the whole fund. So basically everybody in Cleveland, and Jumpstart has a mixed reputation, but everybody in Cleveland was like, phew, because this is a huge effort, right? Lots of money went in. But my big message is, if you don't pick winners, if you don't have successful companies, this doesn't work. And even like, I guess one message I have even here in Strasbourg, like, time will tell. Like, our great entrepreneurs, like, if people don't make money and you don't make money, this whole effort to support the ecosystem is going to fall on its face at some point. So in Cleveland, we had this sort of like sigh of relief, and now Jumpstart has more money. I mean, they were basically out of money. There's controversy about Jumpstart. Jumpstart pays its people very big salaries. Like in the US, if you work for an NGO, you can go look up all the public tax, the salaries, or you have to publicize your tax filings. So like the executives of Jumpstart make $500,000, $400,000 a year. The board says they need to make that amount of money because you have to attract the best people to make these investments. But the newspapers publish that information. So these things, this is a huge effort that we've had in Cleveland. And we had some conversations today with Semi and Alsace Digital about what's happening here, what's happening with government money, how do you get corporations to support these things. Like, it's NGOs can play a really important role. And frankly, what happened in Cleveland is government is limited in what it can do. And then if the private sector isn't working, NGOs can come in the middle to play a role like your NGOs is here to do. Actually, one of the guys in my MOOC, he calls it an artificial reef. So like in San Francisco, do you think San Francisco needs a jump start? Nah, they're fine. They don't need an NGO to do this. It's like working just fine. Their coral reef is great. In Cleveland, we need a jump start. In Strasbourg, you need Semia and Alsace Digital, and I don't know what else you need, right? I mean, even your COD, which I think is doing amazing stuff, right? That could be another area. I think they're organized as an NGO, as I understand. Anchor institutions. I mean, you have great universities here. I mean, University of Strasbourg, what EM Strasbourg is doing. Part of the question, I know Semia is working on this, is like, is anybody working on a startup that's using technology like that's coming out of a university? So like a technology spin out. So that's an area, okay, well, at least one person. I mean, this is a hard thing to do because a lot of the research both in France and in the US is focused on science, right? It's not focused on research to be put into some commercial entity. So at CASE, we have a fund called CASE Technology Ventures. Half the money comes from government, from the third frontier. Half of it comes from the university. And we've put that money into startups. I don't know, the logo up there. One of our startups, a woman, a biomedical engineer named Charu Ramanathan, got money from called Cardio, got money from this fund. Eventually got money from the outside from Medtronic. A lot of her early money was from things like this in government. Eventually they were acquired by Medtronic for about $100 million. So good success for CASE. That's one out of, 10 that we invested in. But universities can play a big role even on deploying capital. I left off the S. I changed that right away. We had an interesting conversation today about like, what's an incubator? What's an accelerator? Like, is Semia an accelerator or an incubator? The terms are sort of like a little bit interchangeable. Just interestingly, in Ohio, we didn't really have any accelerators. And this one fund project basically, and we talked about it actually today with the guys from Alsace Digital, government is granting money to invest in startups. Like, when you did Flash Starts, did you get $25,000 from the state, basically?
Sort of. So Flash Starts
Passed through.
Flash Starts is mixed also. So the first investment they make in any company is state funding.
Yep.
And the second investment they make in any company is private investment.
So Zyla's my plant. So Zyla has a startup that's been in one of the accelerators that's got money from the state. But it's kind of this interesting model. Like, what the hell is the government of Ohio doing granting money to an accelerator to invest in a student startup from CASE? Well, we didn't really have any accelerators, so that was what they decided to do. Okay. Is it working? Like, ask me in 10 years, right? I mean, like, we love the people that run the accelerator that Zyla was in. There's no exits out of that accelerator yet. There's some companies that have raised more money at higher valuations. But, I mean, I think the other big message that I'll have for you tonight is all this effort that you guys in the room are doing to supporting startups, like, let me come back here in 20 years and we'll have this meeting and then we'll see how you're doing, right? Because, I mean, nothing happens fast. I heard a little bit about the Alsace Business Angel Fund today. I think that sounds great. I think it's important for those that aren't familiar about the difference between an angel network and an angel fund. An angel network, like this could be an angel network meeting. We could sort of say, okay, we're going to hear pitches. You would decide if you want to make an investment or not, but you don't make a commitment. From what I understand from Sebastian, how many people in here are in the Alsace Business Angels? You should join. Where are the sign up? You need the sign up sheets. Right?
Sign up later.
Yeah. So these guys have committed 20,000 euro each to this fund, and then startups are pitching them, and they're making how many investments per year?
2 or 3.
2 or 3 a year, right? But at least it's like getting, and in Ohio, every dollar that Angels commits, we have the North Coast Angel Fund, every dollar is matched by government. Do you have a question? Or are you just playing with your, okay. So anyway, funds and state support of funds can be important. Do you think the state of California has a program to support angel investing in San Francisco? No, they don't need to, right? In Cleveland, we do it, and there's tax incentives in France. You know, we had a good conversation today. I mean, what's the tax incentive in France for being a business angel?
18%.
18%, right? You know, it's probably a good thing, right? To motivate people to do these deals. Ohio Capital Fund. So I run a venture capital fund, and the largest investor in our fund is the Ohio Capital Fund. If you look at our little thing, where do you think the Ohio Capital Fund gets its money? Government, right? So we have a fund, $150 million fund in Ohio that invests in venture capital funds based in Ohio. Why would Ohio do that?
This is not a state mistake, it's your mistake.
Okay. Thanks. We said it's not the state's mistake, my mistake. So yes, doing a fund-to-fund investment is actually a good way to, you're basically saying, hey, we trust the managers to make the investment. So that's philosophically why you would do a fund-to-fund. But why would the state do it at all? Why would the state invest in, like, my venture capital fund? Why would government do that? Yeah.
Maybe jobs for future job creation.
Okay, so it's probably all job related. Like, gives me a job. I like jobs. I have 2 jobs. I get to teach and run a venture capital fund, and then our portfolio company, right? But like, what's the problem? Like, what problem are they trying to address? Yep. Right. So they also force us. So basically, they're like, you want our money? You can have our money, but you need to invest in startups that are in Ohio, right? And not every venture capitalist wants to take money that, you know, we call it having strings attached, right? But it's an interesting program. Does the state of California have a California capital fund? No, they don't need to, right? So these are the things that like places like Ohio are doing. Is my person who has Buzz Capital. I pulled that off somebody's LinkedIn profile that had registered for this. I was up late at night connecting with many of you on LinkedIn. Anyway, it seems like there's not a lot of venture capital in Strasbourg, correct? And what's the fund that's sort of like being reorganized?
It was a Cap Invest.
Cap Invest? Okay. So anyway, don't have a lot of venture capital. Okay. That's it. Now we'll talk. What questions do you have or comments? Yes, sir. And introduce yourself for, like, if you raise your hand, say who you are and what you do.
Keith Lupton, here with the Cleveland group, taking the class. Really, my question is around the university. So I know Case has recently put a lot of investments in, I forget what it's called, but it's ThinkBox, yeah. So it's really helping with the startups in entrepreneurship. How important is the university's commitment to this? And is there anything similar that the Strasbourg University may be able to take from it?
Yeah. So Keith was referring, we have a big new makerspace. So, I mean, one interesting thing that happens, and I think governments do a lot of this in universities, it's like, let's put up a new beautiful space because you can raise money for space. Space is, I mean, everything's hard, but space is easy to raise money for. What's hard is like what you guys are doing, right? So like one of the things, I mean, I'm working with a team right now to like think about like the 6th floor, we have like 3D printers and we have wood shop. We have all this amazing kind of fab lab. Is there a fab lab in here?
Yeah.
Somewhere. So that's great. I mean, and if you have a product that you need to make something, like Zyla, you use the ThinkBox for prototyping, right?
I live there.
Yeah, her office is there. But like your Epopia, like you may not need a 3D printer, right? But you could really use some of the like, you know, peanut butter mixing that goes on. So a lot of what we're focused on right now is like when this new entrepreneurship floor opens, like how do you make sure that it has, like, I think these kind of events that you guys are doing are great because it brings people together, but because there's many, and it's not just in Cleveland, there are many beautiful spaces, and I've seen them all around the world that are basically like empty. You know, so like what do you do? You can build a beautiful space, but like what do you do to kind of get people together and make it worthwhile? So that investors, like if you would show up if you knew an investor was going to be here tonight, right? And maybe if an investor is like, I'm looking for some great deals, they would come. So how do you create that kind of DNA? Cool. Come on, Strasbourg, Team Strasbourg, right? Great. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, Bertrand Léger. I'm starting up Horizon, which is an IoT platform.
Great.
And I'm wondering, what was the relationship with Pittsburgh and Cleveland? Because we have a twin city down south, which is a little bit rusty also.
Yeah.
We're more like the chemical city.
Okay.
And they're something else.
Yeah.
So what's the relationship?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we have some institution to institution relationships between like the NGOs, and I think actually it's pretty supportive. I mean, there's shirts in Cleveland that say, Cleveland, at least we're not Detroit. Right? So there's a little bit of competitive, like, and Detroit probably got hit the hardest. Pittsburgh bounced back the quickest. So Carnegie Mellon, which is in our same, so our university and Carnegie Mellon are in the same like conference. Our teams play each other in sports. They made a real commitment to computer science and like machine learning, and it's really worked out well for them. So I mean, Uber came in and basically like hired their for a lot of the self-driving cars, like their whole machine learning department. Google's made a big commitment. So I think Pittsburgh is ahead of us, but it's not competitive. Like they really do want to help us because I think there's for the Rust Belt, for other cities, like we're really, because a lot of this stuff is really an experiment. So when I mentioned like we copied Innovation Works, like we copied it, it's sort of like as a compliment, you know, it's like, hey, and they've been very open and helpful, like here's what we did, here's what didn't go well, and we have other cities that are behind us that are coming and being like, hey, what did you guys do?
Is there sectorial specialization?
A little bit. I mean, they are strong in healthcare as well. We're very focused on healthcare. We actually just had an announcement yesterday, that Plug and Play, which is an accelerator from San Francisco, is setting up an office in Cleveland to focus on healthcare. So we have this hospital called the Cleveland Clinic. You know, it's interesting. I mentioned IRCAD. I mean, when I was in IRCAD last year, what Strasbourg and IRCAD are doing around simulation and guided surgery, like you guys are world leaders. So I do think finding those sectors, like I mean, is IoT something you guys are known here for, or is that just a passion of yours?
Pretty much a passion.
Okay. I mean, that could be fine too. I mean, there's nothing about Cleveland that makes it a good place for your company, is it, Zyla? Not necessarily.
Someone's also bad at IoT.
Yeah, yeah, you think I'm nuts? We're terrible at IoT too. But I think it's usually pretty collaborative. I mean, I think the other interesting question is, you know, keeping, and I don't know, like what brings you to Strasbourg or why you're here and family, but like perhaps you should be at Station F in Paris because there's a bunch of IoT folks that are there and investors, but maybe that doesn't work for you now. I mean, I think it's an interesting question. Like when you're like Zyla's age and like you're young and mobile, it's like, hey, we may not be able to keep our really young entrepreneurs that have businesses that don't fit, but like when you have more gray in your beard or losing your hair, it's like, hey, I have reasons to be in Cleveland, so I'm not necessarily leaving. as much. But we've lost many entrepreneurs because they felt like that sector, a sector isn't supported, which is okay.
We can translate question if you want.
Regarding sectors, do you think we should try to find some, 2 or 3 big sectors and focus on them, or be supportive for the whole ecosystem? Or should we send our best IoT startups to Paris, hoping they will come back? You will come back, right?
Sure. I think it's a great question. I mean, we've tried. There's certain areas that we have, leadership in. Healthcare is one. We have advanced materials, like Goodyear is based in Cleveland. We have advanced manufacturing. Like that big unicorn we had this summer was in healthcare IT. So it was called Cover My Meds. We had another company called Exploris that does big data around healthcare that was acquired by IBM. We also had a company that it was started by an Israeli musician and lawyer that happened to live in Cleveland. I don't know if you have the issue of like when the cable company is coming to install your cable and they tell you they'll be there between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. So they came up with a technology that helps shorten that window, and the company is called Toa Technologies. They were bought by Oracle for about $600 million. There's no reason that Cleveland, like if we did a sector map and we're like, should that company be here? You would be like, no, that's not a good fit. But they happen to be there. And like, I mean, is there a reason that your company should be in Strasbourg?
No.
Right. I mean, but you live here, and I mean, and maybe it's the same with IoT. So I think you want to be opportunistic. When you get great entrepreneurs that are sort of in your thing, how do you like give them the support and embrace them? But if you're too like strict on sectors, you may scare some people away. Well, we can do. I know there's time to maybe informally mix. It's better. Hopefully, my students can stick around for a little while. I'm happy to stay and answer any questions, but I really wish you luck. I mean, it's exciting, the things that you're doing. I mean, we've had a good 2 days of interaction, and the white paper that you guys put together was great. I mean, there's some people like Brad Feld for a book called Startup Communities that's referred to in your white paper that's like kind of a Bible for, he's from a city called Boulder, which is a beautiful place, but it's not, like the fact that it's a startup capital or doing well is a surprise, so that book is really good. But if we can be helpful at all in Cleveland in any way, just like please email or tweet or link in. Yeah.
What about intrapreneurship and private incubators or accelerators?
Yeah.
Is it a good model for you?
Yeah. So the question is around sort of corporate accelerators and incubators. Like we had a conversation today with the Alsace Digital guys. This is a hot topic. I mean, I went when I was in Bordeaux. These guys. Does anybody know? That's what's the name of the bank? Credit. Okay. So here's my reaction. So I walk in their place in Bordeaux. Does anybody work for that bank here? Before I say bad things about it. I walk in this. It's beautiful. It's like right in the middle of Bordeaux. I walk in this beautiful space and I meet the people. I meet some of the entrepreneurs, and I meet the people running it. And I think it's so beautiful of a space. And I'm like, anytime I walk into a really beautiful corporate incubation space, and I'm like, why? I'm like, why is the bank doing this thing? And they said, yeah, these entrepreneurs are our future customers. We're building relationships. I'm like, okay, maybe, right? Why are they doing it? Marketing. So they're saying, hey, we are all about supporting entrepreneurs in our community. And like, that may make sense for them, and that's great. I mean, what I said to the woman running it, I was like, you just better hope that whoever's the CEO of that bank doesn't wake up one day and is like, why do we have this beautiful, like, 'cause I don't, so sometimes you walk into accelerators and to me, they're just like, and I think they're helping the entrepreneurs, but it seems like a ton of money, at least in my view, with not a ton of return. Other accelerators, and we see like some of our former students my former startups work at Goodyear. They have an innovation group. It's not really an incubator, but they're sort of interested in trying to get startups and bring some of that innovation, as you say, kind of inside the larger company. So some companies are committed to that. Techstars, which is the partner for sort of Startup Weekend, they have partnerships with a lot of different big corporations. Actually, Plug and Play has a partnership with Mercedes in Stuttgart. So this is a hot area. If you were asking me as the CEO of some company about whether I think it's a great use of resources to do this, it really depends. I think it can be really good for entrepreneurs if you can find the right fit. But you also have to be careful, I think, with corporate investors. You don't want to give, who would be the perfect partner for your business?
Walt Disney.
Who?
Walt Disney.
What's the name of the company?
Walt Disney.
Oh, Walt Disney. Okay, that would be good. Yes, I've heard of them. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that company. Right. So if Walt Disney approaches these guys tomorrow and are like, "Hey, come into our corporate accelerator," it may make sense, but all of a sudden you're now, in bed with Walt Disney. You can't do things with everybody else. So it's a little bit of a dance, but it's a hot area. I just think I'm like watching it with a little bit of maybe French cynicism. I'm like, all right. Well, I'm like, why? Well, I'm always asking the question of like, why are you doing it? And sometimes I'm not, And if it's just marketing or corporate social responsibility, that's fine. Is it really helping? Entrepreneurship. I don't know.
Do you think a good ecosystem must mix some profiles that are not the same? I think when we are in normal place, so we can't meet some people which are not the same.
Right.
I think one part of the innovative ecosystem is to make a neighborhood which is mixed.
Interesting.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I think having diverse perspectives can be really important, I think, for the growth of companies. I think what happens like a lot in Cleveland, Zyla, you could chime in, like we start seeing the same people at every event. And how do you bring in, like even something like this, which again, like I'd love to come to Strasbourg more than once a year, but just like to bring in 25 new, fresh, Americans with and then we're meeting you guys and we're exchanging and engaging, like that can be really healthy. That doesn't happen that often. And probably for you guys, one of the things that I always say, even to like my friends that are coming as tourists overseas, is like, you should go be an entrepreneurship tourist. So like, I don't know how much, do you do a lot of travel outside of Strasbourg or France? Or like, give me an example of a place that you visited recently. Like when you go outside of Strasbourg in France, where's a place that you visited recently? Okay, but even Paris, like has anyone here been to Station F? Does anybody know about it? It's this massive accelerator, right? So next time you're in Paris, you guys should do a field trip to Station. I'm sure they'd be happy to see you, right? And like, maybe you're like, holy shit, this is unbelievable. Like, these are some great ideas. And then you bring that back, and next time you're back, like, you give a slideshow at Alsace Digital. It's like, here's my field trip I took to Station F. But even better yet, like, you come to Cleveland, or you go to Pittsburgh, or you go to Iceland. We're so jealous of Europeans. You guys can be on a train or on a bus and in another city and culture in like an hour. For us, like, it's not so easy. So I think you should take advantage. I guess my advice would be, how do you take advantage of that proximity to get new ideas into your community? Which may not have been exactly what you were asking. Ben.
So it sounds like a lot of what you're saying, some of the issues that a lot of startups run into tend to be matters of sort of local economics and the investors not being from the area or not looking at the area. And I think one of the ways that to look at building this ecosystem is to try and draw attention of the people in Silicon Valley, where all the money is centrally located. They're looking there, they're looking locally.
Right.
But there's all these things outside there that they're ignoring. Are there ways to attract attention to away from those hubs like that to smaller, newer areas like Cleveland or Strasbourg?
Well, I'll answer it in two ways. I think the first, more directly, how many are familiar with AngelList? So AngelList is a platform that allows an entrepreneur in Strasbourg to reach the world, right? You could put your information. Now, what are the chances that someone in Silicon Valley, there's a lot of, like any of these social platforms, it's not always easy to be found. But I do think that there are opportunities on platforms like AngelList that you can reach a broader audience. I guess the second point on that is I call them people in the diaspora, right? So who from I'm sure there are, Pierre Omidyar, I don't know if he's from Strasbourg. Pierre Omidyar is one of the founders of eBay. He's lived in the US most of his life, but he's French. I'm sure he might be more likely to respond to an IoT entrepreneur from France than he would be some other part of the world, maybe not the US. So I would encourage you to think about who are the alums of, where did you do your studies?
I did my university in France.
Okay, which university?
Bordeaux, Lyon.
Okay, if you find, in the US, we're big into where did you go to university and can we network? So maybe somebody who's a university alum who lives in San Francisco, you could find, right? The other point I'll make, which is almost the opposite of what you said, is I believe, and I know this is true in Cleveland, and I believe it's true in France, and I know it's true in Germany, there are many wealthy people that don't invest in this stuff, right? So in Germany, they call them, what are the, I forgot the name, the wealthy private business people that own there's a term, that own manufacturing shops, or, everyone help me out here, I forget the name. There's some what? I can't remember. I'll think of it in a second. There's some term. Every time I'm in Germany, they're these really wealthy, self-made business people don't want to invest in startups because they're I built my business myself. Why would I give you guys money? That's, So I'm sure in Bordeaux, where are we? Strasbourg. I was in Bordeaux last week. I'm sure in Strasbourg, there are wealthy people that made their money in real estate or something that don't know anything about educational startups. So I think the interesting question for your business angel group is how do you get, because I think it's hard. I think that is aspirational. How do you find these diaspora? But the bigger question is how do you find rich people here that normally aren't going to be, it's a little bit of the diversity. How do you sort of get new faces here, including somebody that actually can write a check? So I think things like what you're doing with the network are important, but that's where you have to keep working. And in Cleveland, there's an attitude of rich people in Cleveland that's the best deals are all, why would you invest in Cleveland? The worst deals are in Cleveland, the best deals are everywhere else. So you need to be no, do some local deals, which is hard.
And how did you start the investing part in Cleveland? As you said, you didn't have business angel, you didn't have a VC fund. So how did you start? By taking external funds?
A lot of it was government. It was this government and for us foundations coming together and collaborating, because we didn't have any of that stuff, and it all sort of happened at once. We created all these new NGOs, we created funds.
But now you have some VC funds from Cleveland?
Yeah, and that's been hard. I can have a whole discussion with you about because I run a venture fund, how hard it is. Yes. So some of our venture funds, including my own, and I'm honest with my students, why am I teaching full time at business school instead of running another fund? I can't raise more money because it's taking me forever. I'm year 13 in our fund, so I might enjoy. The things are coming down. Yeah, it's very hard to raise money. Very hard to raise money.
Zbigniew, along with a few...
Introduce yourself to all these people. There could be
my
a
name
future
is
future
Zbigniew,
investor in
and,
here.
some of you may already know me from our yesterday meeting, and as some of you may already know, with a few colleagues of mine from school, after graduation we would like to start a company in the biofuel sector, but leading it to success will require a large upfront investments in land, in machinery, and other sorts of things. Contractors who will do construction work and so forth. Outside government, outside business angels, and banks, where can we look to potentially receive some sort of a large cash infusion at the start?
I thought you were going to say robbing a bank. I mean, hey, that's the million euro question, right? Like, it's very difficult, you know, as a first-time entrepreneur, where there's a capital-intensive project. I mean, I do think that's where government, and I don't know all the different schemes here, but like, you know, it's not easy. Right, there's not a simple answer, but I think making sure you look at every single available program and bothering many people with your pitch. But I mean, when after you sort of say, if it's not government, if it's not this, angels, it's like, I'm not sure who's left, but I think you just gotta hustle.
You can do what Elon Musk did. You do PayPal and then you do Tesla.
That would be good, right? Have a big exit. Do Tesla and SpaceX.
One last question?
Sure.
Yeah. I have a question. How developed should be the startup to start search for funding, for angels and so on? Because I'm personally from Russia and we wanted to do some startups. We had an idea, we made the platform, it was for sports, but then we went to AngelLists in the USA.
Okay.
And we found some people who were interested, but still they wanted us to have already run a business in a small version of it, only in the beginning, but already running with customers, with everyone. And we couldn't do this by the time because it was done yet, and we wanted to make it proper.
Yeah.
So, like, what level should the company be to ask for funding, or maybe which fund should be in the very early stages? And which is better when you're a little bit developed?
Sure. No, it's a great question. And I'm going to recommend during the social hour, you go find that student back there, Zyla, during. You have to talk to her. And talk to the Epopia. Because I think actually the best answer for this is just networking with other entrepreneurs that have gone through the process. I mean, I don't think it's a simple answer because it always depends. I mean, there are startups that raise money revenue, pre-plan, you know, I mean, look at it, Instagram. I mean, Instagram had some other application that wasn't working, they pivoted, they got a lot of users, they had no revenue, they got bought by Facebook for $1 billion. You know, I mean, you can read many stories, and the answer to when the right time to raise money, depending on which article you read, is going to be different, right? So I do think that the best thing to do is just keep networking, and frankly, like, if you're are you in Strasbourg as a student or you're working here? Yeah, I mean, these things are great. Like, everybody in this room should know your story and what you're doing and getting advice. You have to be, and it's hard actually as an outsider. You know, a lot of our students, like a case, like they're coming from other countries, and how do you take advantage of the time that you're here to build a network and get advice? But I think there's probably some good people in this room to help you answer that. Good.
Talking about networking. It was the last question, so now it's networking time. So thank you, and let's have a drink.
Great, thanks.